Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of Behringer Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's history museum, that would not be possible without support. Thank you to all of our sponsors, including the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, Kentucky Arts Council, Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale Jr. Foundation, and our members. If you're not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining for access to discounts and exclusive programming. Learn more and join at bcmuseum.org. We would love to hear from our viewers tonight. So if you have a question or a comment to share, please type it in the chat or Q&A feature, and I'll be sure to get to those at the end of the presentation. Let's meet tonight's speaker. Richard Chalice was given a membership to the Committee of 500 by football legend George Ratterman in 1961. He received his Northern Kentucky University Master of Arts degree in Public History in 2012 and has completed an oral history project on the origins and effects of organized crime in Newport, Kentucky. He retired from Comair Airlines in 2009 and has been married to his wife Emily for 42 years. For the last 18 years, they have fought against mass pollution in the greater Cincinnati area from a plastic plant in Addiston, Ohio. So Dick, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and also Jason. Before we get started, there is a quiz question tonight. The first respondent to enter a correct answer in the chat on Zoom or Facebook Live wins a Northern Kentucky History Hour prize, and most importantly, bragging rights. Tonight's question is, what was Bob Hope's amateur boxing name? So if you want to go ahead and start guessing or giving some answers for that, I will be sure to read those, and whoever answers first on Facebook Live or on Zoom will win a prize. So, gentlemen, go ahead and get started.
I'd like to thank Mary Jane Feldman and Jason French for allowing me to come in today. I'm going to tell you a little bit of background here. Two adjoining cities in Campbell County, Kentucky, Newport and Fort Thomas. The latter, 1920 to the 1960s, had distinct differences between their cultures. I had personal knowledge of these different city cultures as a student at Highlands High School in Fort Thomas. The presentation will emphasize the effects of prohibition, organized crime, Newport and Fort Thomas, Kentucky children's culture, the FBI, and the Chalice family. Hank Messick, author and excellent investigative reporter for the Louisville Courier-Journal, is the authority on Northern Kentucky's organized crime. Messick personally experienced life-threatening actions against him by the Cleveland Syndicate that controlled Northern Kentucky, comprising of Jewish men from highly persecuted Eastern European Jewish ancestry: Mo Dillis, Morris Kleinman, Louis Rothkopf, and Sam Tucker. Two of Hank Messick's books are recommended reading. One is Razzle Dazzle, and the other one is Syndicate Wife, the story of Anne Bauman Coppola. These are two excellent books to tell it. The center's future book is going to be Stepchild, The Effects of Organized Crime on Northern Kentucky. And I use Hank Messick as one of the book's primary resources. In my interview with Nick Clooney, he's a nationally known newsman and TV anchor, and you all know him, his son a little bit better as George Clooney, the actor. He added that one of the major causes for the perceived illness that Kentucky has been and still qualifies as one of the most corrupt states in the United States is the designation of wet and dry counties in one of the largest hard liquor producing states in the nation. This fosters widespread criminal activity. The ratification of the 21st Amendment, the repeal of prohibition, allowed states to remain dry, and Kentucky split its counties wet and dry. organized crime's massive rise started after World War I with the passage of the 18th Amendment and the law enforcement agency, the Volstead Act. One of the largest lobbyists in Washington, D.C. was the Anti-Saloon League. They did not have enough votes for the ratification of the Constitution, of the 21st Amendment, of the 18th Amendment, excuse me. And they attacked, because we were at war with Germany at the time, they attacked the German Americans with ads and liquor distilleries.
Yes.
These ads were vicious, and so in northern Kentucky, the German community, the schools were closed, German name streets were changed, libraries eliminated German language books. Extreme measures fostered a distrust of government by the German Americans, and the Volstead Act shut down the distilleries and destroyed moonshine stills, but it was ineffectual on stopping bootleg liquor from the mob. On the Volstead Act, my cousin was fairly famous as Cole Porter, the songwriter. Let's see, next one. He wrote a song against Volstead, and so he was living in France at the time when he wrote the song, and then he produced a Broadway show called 50 Million Frenchmen. He wrote A Toast to Volstead. It's a long life to Volstead, our senator from heaven sent. Let's give our endorsement to his act of enforcement. What a noble experiment. Let's sing a swan song to liquor, that life on which we are all cursed. Here's a long life to Volstead, and hope he dies of thirst. After the 21st Amendment was passed, he wrote a new Broadway play, which was Anything Goes. And he mentions then, you're the top, you're Napoleon Brandy. He wanted that as a thank you to President Roosevelt for the passing of the 21st Amendment. Okay, the Mama Street. This is where the Mama Street is where we all came down to. You see the Dixie Chili there on the left. This was the stopping point for kids from Highlands High School and Fort Thomas. We all came down to that spot. What it is, it's a one-way street going toward the river. This is where prostitutes were called the day prostitutes, and then there was a night prostitutes on the other street, York Street, when they were coming back from the show. And so the kids, and so they call this Hollywood East. I went down when I was a 8th grader, and went and got an autograph from Shirley MacLaine. But you had other ones. You had Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis, Jimmy Durante, Carol Channing. They were all came to Newport to have a good time. And so in this is what they call Southgate Alley. It was 1 square mile inside Newport. In this 1 square mile, you had 23 casinos. You had about 1,100 slot machines. The kids also and so were able to go to the movies, which had 7 movies within that square. This was the kids and so were very sophisticated back then, from 12-year-olds to 14-year-olds. They had they had a language and so that like Broady's, the Broady House, any of the whorehouses, all these terms they used, and we the theater, the Strand Theater, the Strand Theater is where is one of the theaters that the kids went to, and this they were able to see what they call newsreels. The newsreels itself kind of kept them up to date as to what was happening. Back in the war days, you had Lowell Thomas and so as a newsreel, but it was also used as propaganda. And the propaganda was the J. Edgar Hoover used these newsreels to promote himself. The reason there was crime is, I mean, they had a mob there in Newport is because the hands-off policy by the FBI. Hoover himself was blackmailed by the mob for his Del Mar racetracks, where he was able to be getting next. He was able to do give money to fund the mob and everything, so he didn't touch Newport at all. Fort Thomas, I'm sorry to say, I'm going to mention our moniker. We were called the cake eaters, and the reason we were hated by the people there in Newport and so the kids, because they couldn't come up to Fort Thomas, but we could come down to them. And so it was they had a racially restricted covenants in their ordinance, which means blacks couldn't purchase property at that time. They were they had also a problem with the kids trying to come up into Fort Thomas. They were stopped by the police, and if you had a football game, they waited and made sure that the blacks were put on the bus. So it was highly restricted there in Fort Thomas. The bus 11 Fort Thomas. This is how we got down to Newport. What it did, it started up close to Highland Heights and came on down through Mama Street. We were able to get off and go to places like the Dixie Chili. And of course, kept on the bus. We went into the Dixie Terminal, which was a carbon monoxide problem. And so, but most of the time, our parents did not know we were going down. So we would go down, go into like the Dixie Chili. Inside the Dixie Chili, a lot of times after work, and so the prostitutes came in, and they were always asking for our advice, and so it was, of course, they were using slot machines. But what they did was they were wanting like safe abortions or something like that. We tell them that there was construction workers that did it. There was a taxidermist in town that did it, and also a pharmacist from Gatlinburg, Texas, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, also was in it. It's Newport Chili. This is where everyone met. Bob Hope used to come here all the time to eat. He also did went down and worked at the Strand and did his comic act. But how he came, what happened to Bob Hope was, did he belong to the mob? He did not belong to the syndicate, and he did not belong to the Italian mafia. But what he did belong to was in Cleveland, Ohio, when he came there in 1908. He grew up as a kid as a boxer. And what he would do is he worked for an individual from the Cleveland News called Arthur Mickey McBride. And what McBride did was he would hire these kids to go on certain blocks and beat up any kind of competition to try to get onto that block. So that's what Bob Hope did. He was one of the top boxers for Mickey McBride, who was, by the way, with the Hearst newspaper. He was paid $10,000 a year, and at that time that was worth around $220,000. So it was paid pretty good. And later on, Bob Hope, he thought he was going to be the neighbor of the amateur boxing champion of Ohio, but he met his name was Leslie Towns Hope, and in the United States that was a girl's name in England, and so it passed, and so he had to change his name. So he picked a boxing name, and the boxing name was Packy East. And Packy was from Don McFarland, who was a famous boxer. They called him Packy McFarland. So he took his name. But he also used East, since he went to East Cleveland High School. So he became a boxer that way. But when he met a fellow named Happy Walsh, and he always talked about it, he said, I hit him with the best shot I had. And he laughed at me. And then he said everything went blank after that. So he decided to get in another field. And that other field then was comedy. And so these are the brothels that were in Newport. And you see a lot of them. So if you ever go over to Brio's, it's a place to eat there in Newport Levee. That used to be Goldie's, and it's just the north part of the Southgate Alley, and so it was all brothels. So
like 2nd Street, was that right?
Right.
It was
right.
Down.
2nd Street, totally brothels through that entire area, and most of them so were, like the St. Nate, either night brothels situation or the daytime brothels. But you also see what they had was like bar girls, and so at something like Frolics. And what you do is when you came in, you would, they would have a drink, and then you pay for a drink, and then talk with a girl about doing whatever sex acts you want to do. But the Vivian's, this is Vivian's. Now, when you had people coming in from all over the place, from the high schools, in Cincinnati, the parochial schools, every 2 months they had what they call high school discount day. And what they had is the girls would cost $1, and you had to pay the madam $1, so $2. But they did this as a front situation. They wanted to make sure that the kids in the area saw what they were doing, so that by the time they were 15 years old, they were in the brothels. And where they caught you on this is they would see you doing different things in the brothels, and that's when you paid money. So you had some of these kids working part-time jobs just to go into these places. So it was a real disaster for
blackmail on you and
blackmail. And well, like the Heidi Hole Club, they had recorders in there, and the girls would ask questions, and so when they found out that where they lived, and they said, if you don't pay us $10,000, we're going to tell your wife, and that's pretty much how they operated. And so
now, is this is on Monroe, or is this not?
No, this is on Third Street.
Okay, so that's on Third Street.
This is on Third Street.
Vendome was on Monroe. Was that, or is
Vivian's?
Well, there was one called Vendome, right? Was it? Do you remember that? Or
I don't remember that one.
Okay, maybe earlier.
Okay, it's but like I say, there was 300 girls that were working at a time in Silver Newport, so it's they were kept pretty busy. They had a clientele of almost 1.2 million people a year that came into Newport, and there was.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure everyone knows. I do know that the chat is disabled right now, so I apologize for people that haven't been able to try to answer the question or leave comments. But as soon as we are done sharing the screen and his presentation is ended, I will make sure to enable that, and we will get that running, and we'll get to all the comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay. We'll go to the next one here. That's Ruth Lyons, of course, with Bob Hope and the 50/50 Club. Bob liked Newport an awful lot. He liked the girls, and he was one of the people that talked about the Dixie chili that's all over the country. That's why Cincinnati chili right now is considered the best chili in the country. These celebrities told how they were made. This is Mickey McBride, and the person next to him is Paul Brown. Mickey McBride also bought the Cleveland Browns at the time, and that was in 1944. And what he did was he wanted to have a winning team. So he found out that Paul Brown he worked at Ohio State and also at the shipyards, and so for the Navy. He was still in the Navy when he hired him. He hired him for $17,500. And at that time, it was worth $260,000 a day today. So what Paul would ask him to do is to get a roster that they could win. Well, they won the American Conference 3 years in a row. And so when they had it, and the reason for it is Mickey McBride also owned taxi companies. He owned the Yellow Cab. So in order to keep new players coming in, they may have not made the roster, but Paul Brown, he would hire them as taxi cab drivers, but they never went to work. That's why they called them the taxi squad. And later on, he had, because of the Kefauver for against the mob, and so he had to sell the team. So that's I'm glad that the Cleveland Browns, they were big in this area before the Bengals were. J. Edgar Hoover, he's probably the villain of this entire thing. He could have stopped. Could have stopped the mob. He once said, "If you want to stop the mob, all you do is have the local police do it." Well, the local police were in the mob, so he couldn't do it. He was worried that he was against the homosexuals. He was also against a lot of the blacks. As reported, he was homosexual himself, and that's the reason he wanted to keep that hidden. And so the blacks reported he was a mulattoes in his ancestry, and there's pretty much true. They've done enough studies on the thing, and that's very much true. So again, he had secret files, and the secret files were usually sexual in nature. He had one of the biggest porno conglomerate things that he had reached. He was into porno very heavily. He had some of his FBI agents in drag going into gay bars and so at the time. So, like I say, he blackmailed presidents. That's the reason they kept him in. He could have stopped the mob the way it was as quickly. Now, this next picture, this is my grandfather. He was an opera singer. There he is Don Giovanni of Mozart. And I was up with him in New York, and we went to a what they call a communist cell. And he was, at the time, all I remember at 7 years old is they had in Times Square, they had this cowboy that was smoking. And so it was, but what he did was he blacklisted him later on, so he couldn't find a job.
So Hoover did that to your grandfather?
Well, the FBI
did.
But he had the fouls on him, and he was a subversive. And the thing about it is he had helped the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which was fighting as independent volunteers in Spain. And it was
fighting with the Spanish, I can't remember what
royalists,
with the royals against the Nazis. And
against the Nazis and fascists.
Yeah.
Hoover was extremely anti-communist, and so he did have communist tendencies. I went to the meeting. I found out that they had me down as being a communist sympathizer, and I didn't even know what the heck it was, and it's 7 years old. But anybody that ever wants to check and so what they have, they can get the Freedom Information Act to find out who it was. But again, Hoover and so destroyed him, and also his cousin was Amelia Earhart, and they grew up in Atchison, Kansas. And
so your grandfather's cousin was Amelia.
Well, she married somebody, and we from the marriage were cousins and stuff like that. But what he did had a foul on her because she was an outspoken feminist. So it's again, Hoover had fouls on 170 million people at the time, and he used it for blackmailing later on presidents and everything else. The Frank Screw Andrews, mobster, killed a fellow, Melvin Clark, to take over his business in the black section of Newport. And what he did is did a numbers record.
Now that's supposed to be self-defense, although
he got off the self-defense, but he did
self-defense.
He did serve a couple of times, and he finally got out. Of course, we knew what happened to him, but
he fell out that window.
Well, he fell out the window, the sixth floor, at the hospital there in Fort Thomas. But we had on the next one here, we have one of our classmates. This is Eddie Berger. Eddie was always going down and trying to get into fights down in Newport, and to show how that he was the top dog. He dated Angie Andrews, and so Screw's daughter. And what he did when he did that, and so he went to pick up Angie, and this next place is where Screw lived, and that's in Cold Spring. That's his house. It looks nice right now. In the old days, so you had men lined up on both sides with guns so that you couldn't get into it. Screw was always worried that somebody was going to kill him, and so it's we thought when he picked him up. He considered himself top dude, and so in our peer group, and so
Screw's club was Glenn Schmidt or
no, that's Scott, the Sportsman's Club. Yeah.
Oh, Sportsman's Club. Okay.
Yeah, and that was the numbers racket, and Newport was the biggest numbers record in the country at one time. This innocent-looking guy is Johnny Bob Zine. He lived over the street from where I was. What he did was get a hold of the cab drivers, and anytime these fellas come out of these out of the bust-out joints with any money, the cab driver would call him up, and he would take the client into an alleyway, and he had a blackjack, and they robbed him. Johnny here himself driving around new cars and everything else in those days. But surprising, it was the cab drivers themselves that were the nucleus of downtown Newport. Without them, it's $1.35 from drive from Cincinnati over to Newport. And so, but that's not where they made their money. They made their money with 40% from the prostitutes. They made 40% from the gambling establishments that they took their clients to. So the best job pretty much in Newport was a cab driver. George Retterman, met him down at with my father. My father worked at Penny's, and it's now, as you well know, the Newport Racing and Gambling is down there now. My father told me that I was interested in the Committee of 500, and he sent me a membership to it. But he was an icon in our area. He was the only one of four people at Notre Dame he got his letter in tennis, football, baseball, and basketball. He was only one of four people to do that. And what he was mad about is that the Catholics were not involved with the reform movement. And the reason they weren't is because whenever the ministerial society, which is Protestant, instead of going after the casinos, they go after the bingos. They go after they would go after the festivals that the Catholics had. And Catholics did not tolerate that kind of stuff. They believed, in moderate drinking, moderate gambling. So, but when they started the Committee of 500, they came up to George Retterman and they asked him, if he would run, and he said yes. He says, because I'm the only Catholic on the Committee of 500, and what he did was they were going to have him run for sheriff, and he was what they did was drugging the mob, his best friend, and so when let's see, from Retterman, so he had excuse me, April flowers, and so they had him in bed, and so with him and took some pictures, that type of thing. But when the trial was started, he was going to be fined $10 for disturbing the police, and so they were able to get him off. At that time, when he was running for office, he was not going to win. And so, but after he was acquitted the next day, and so Bobby Kennedy came down, and he was either going to go after Jimmy Hoffa, or he was going to go after the mob there in Newport. He picked the mob. They got indictments. People like Screw Andrews, and they got the numbers racket out. And Newport was the largest city in the United States to exit a syndicate and a mafia group. And so at that time, there were 30,000 people. Now it's a little bit over 14,000 they have there. So you can see that the businesses were all in tune to for the gambling. And later on, so we see what's happened, like with the Newport Racing and Gambling. Oh, this all I forgot about Bob there. When he was running for office, the office was let's keep it honest party, and so that was the political arm of the Committee of 500. It was run by Bob Heinze. This is Bob Heinze's son. He's tackle all conference for Highlands High School. They decided to break his legs at one of the games. So they hired some of the kids at the Newport Public game that the Highlands is going to be played. At that time, Homer Rice was the coach. Someone snitched and said that they were going to cross-block him or try to injure him in a bad way because his father was head of this, let's keep it honest, political party. But what happened was he kept him out of the game. Allen still won the game, 26 to 12. But it goes to show you that what they would do to the kids. And so now, the one thing about it is they did not. They had the syndicate had one thing that they did not do. They did not harm pedestrians, and the reason for that is bad publicity. So if whenever they had fires or anything like that, they made sure that no one was inside. And so when they did this, so again, the last one is the next one, the last one, Bobby Kennedy. He's the one that came down, and because of his actions and so in Newport, the Committee of 500, which was supposed to, Radimer was supposed to lose that election by bad. He won by 12,000 votes. Finally, the people in the area said, "We've had enough of this." That the bust-out joint, the plush casinos, and so were just the same. They just in February of '62, the mob got together down in Miami. Said it's time to go back out to Las Vegas, and they packed them out and left at that time. At fall, and so this is a Newport gaming, racing and gaming. Dr. Claypool here is the horse racing historian. So for the club, so
that's at Newport Plaza.
Yeah, well, it used to be like
Carruthers and
Pennies, and so it's now that, and it's just it's owned by the Churchill Downs. You got an honesty and so picture and so with it that they have, and it's just it's gambling's going to be coming back, but it's coming back legit, and hopefully it's going to revitalize Newport again.
Now, I do have one. So as I'm trying to figure out how to enable the commenting in the chat feature, you are still able in the Q&A. You can leave questions there, and I can ask Dick. But I do have a couple of questions already in the Q&A. Do you believe that illegal activities in Newport has influenced the reluctance of present state legislation to legalize gambling?
No, they consider Northern Kentucky the stepchild here. I mean, we have no influence downstate at all. It's that's why probably Prince Vance Bridge wasn't even done because it's just around here we're a stepchild for the rest of the country. We were the Yankees, the gangsters, the gamblers, the prostitutes, and the pimps, and so that's what they thought of us. That's how much they usually still think of us. So I don't think the influence of Newport at all will have any effect on downstate.
I have one more. Any reflections of Father, is it Dye? D-E-Y-E, Dye?
Father Dye. Mm-hmm. Okay, I know Father Ackerman that was when George Ratterman was. And Tito Carenzi, and so one of the gangsters. And so they came out of Steubenville, just like Dean Martin did. In fact, they were allegedly their cousins, Tito is. And I might say that's another interesting fellow. He's one of the very few people that Xavier got the award for academics and for sports. Xavier was in a salad bowl back in 1950, the only bowl they ever been in. They beat Arizona State, and Tito played for him. So, but Tito was the one that actually had his friend Letterman drugged, and so.
I have one more too here. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Linda wants to know, what were you saying about the parochial schools in Cincy? Please elaborate.
Okay, well, when the houses of prostitution had what they call high school discount day, there was scores of people coming across the Central Bridge at that time. It's now the Taylor Southgate Bridge, but not just the parochial schools, but the public schools too. But everybody met at that time, and they used the facilities. And it's just that's what the houses of prostitution were trying to do, is trying to get the kids, and so to go to these places, and that way they have clients for later on when they get older too. But the parochial schools and everyone else took advantage of it and came. And it's just and another sad situation. The Protestants and the Catholics did not get along with each other at all down in Newport. So when you had Newport Public playing Newport Catholic, you had cars being smashed, basketball games, you had mackerels being thrown in the court, and because of Friday, and it was a horrible situation. And that's one of the reasons the reform groups could never get the Catholics and the Protestants together, because you have 40% of the population down there being Catholic, and they ignored them, the reform groups, and that's why. But the chief person for why the mob was able to get by was J. Edgar Hoover, and it was nothing.
Are you of the belief that the syndicate was fully behind the two fires at the Beverly Hills Supper Club?
I thought you didn't want me to answer that question.
Michael has asked, I'm just reading the questions.
Okay. Well, I think it's like with Jackie Kennedy. They came to her and she was saying, they told her that her husband was killed by a communist. And she says, isn't that pitiful that a silly little communist was responsible? You had then 400 books. It was a grassy knoll. Mm-hmm. 40-year-old building. If you had the mob involved with the such, they could care less about Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills no longer had gambling. Their profit ratio was nothing like it was out in Las Vegas. So they had no reason. The cash situation was not there for them to do anything to them. So my answer to that is I'm going to be saying just like the commission. So Steve Beshear father of our present governor, they asked him to reopen the case. They took one day, they looked at it and they said, this doesn't work. And so there was $43 million that was, I think, rightly collected for a lawsuit. So but 165 people being killed. No, they were not. Bob was not involved there.
So I was thinking, as you were talking about when you joined the Committee of 500. So you'd been a young man that had came down and spent time in Newport.
Right.
What was the catalyst for you to decide in your life, why did this have to go? Why did you want to get rid of it?
I think Johnny Bodzine, when I found out that they were down there rolling people.
So your friend that was the person
they were rolling people down at these bust out joints. It was a terrible situation. They were all when they say it was safe to walk in Newport, it was if you were a pedestrian. But if you were a client at one of the bust out joints and you made any money at all, you weren't getting out of there with your money. And if you did get it out, then the cab drivers, people like Johnny Bodzine, would roll you. So I told him, I said, I really wasn't against too much of the gambling, because the gambling, every one of the stores down there had slot machines in it, you were talking about, and it was just a money-making situation. When in 1960, airplanes were, becoming jets and everything, and able to fly out to Vegas, and you did have less hassle out there because gambling was illegal in the state. So why not go to a place that's easy? But the first seven casinos out there in Las Vegas were Newport affiliated. So you went out to the MGM, you found out all the guys that were at Beverly Hills or any place else working the tables and everything else. And it's
all of the cab drivers and stuff ended out there too.
All the cab drivers probably, because that was their money. But people don't understand it. It's 200 how much money these cab drivers made. It's just wonderful how they were able to finesse that situation. Not wonderful. It's wonderful to them, but it was terrible to the clients and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when or what was the last casino to close in Newport and when that was? That was the question.
With George Redmond there, it was about a couple of years afterwards that all the casinos were going. That was a situation. I don't know which one was the last one, but in February of '62, like I say, the major syndicates, the major mafia, they got out of the place because they saw that the Commonwealth attorney, he was going to be running for office, and so they knew that they were going to lose at the election box. And people like Frank Benton the third, and so became won his election. So, and it was just not profitable for him to stay here. So I think they went out in mass situations. Maybe a couple of them stayed around. Prostitution stayed around because only 20% of the prostitutes were run by the syndicate. So in Newport, and so prostitution lasted for another almost 2 decades longer after that. And so
you still had the bar girls.
You still had the bar girls and everything. And, the little nickel and dime type people. And of course, Sportsman's Club, burned and the rest of it. And I think they tried to shut
Mustang burned too, right? Was it Mustang or
it's just about any of them? Because it was just like I say, the Ratterman, as far as I'm concerned, he was the savior for the area, along with Bobby Kennedy. And if he had not gotten the church involved with getting rid of the mob, we probably would still have it. So
I have a nice comment from Mary on here. She said about 50 plus years ago, her friends hosted foreign students. The student they got from India immediately asked to go to Sin City, referring to Newport. She said, my friends were dumbfounded. I thought that was nice. And then also I have from Luke, he says, please discuss Red Masterson.
Red Masterson, he was a good person to go to Halloween. He gave out several dollars at his house there in Fort Thomas, which was right there in the center of town. Red Masterson was the hitman for the syndicate, and he was Ratterman, and so he said, when Ratterman came into his place, he'd sit down and he was going to see if there, if he can get him for gambling and something like that. But Masterson, like I say, was the top hitman for the syndicate. And again, he owned the Random Merchants Club down there in Newport. And he was usually the syndicate. Now, the difference, by the way, between syndicate and the mafia, by the way, it's the syndicate is a loose group of people. You had, like I say, Diaz, Kleinman, and so Lotfkoff, and so they were all they were Jewish, but they weren't a family situation. Usually, the mob with Italians and so like that were they were a family organization. Now, a syndicate can become a mafia situation if they're all kind of related, and so. But these guys came from, like say, Eastern. Their ancestry is from Eastern Europe, and they were having pogroms and everything else at that time, and so they finally, came to this country. So they were nasty by the time they got here, and in the end, the mafia did not make hardly any money at all. The Jewish syndicate made millions out there in Las Vegas, and so it was highly profitable. Later on, they went into legitimate businesses, and they disbanded that way.
Hank has asked us, is there any idea why the Brass Mule is still in business?
I was working at in Newport, and she was one working for me, and so that's Amanda Riley. She, her husband was killed, by the way. They shot him so that they get hold of it. But the Brass Mule, she's a great entrepreneur, let me tell you, and she was a good worker. I see it. It's over on the side that as you go down Carruthers Road, and so the building's there now. She, like I say, she worked for when I was working down there at one of the superstores, and so they had Amanda. She just keeps on going.
Somebody else, Donna, asked, "Are there any strip clubs left?" But apparently,
no. That's the Brass and the Bull. Yeah, they're there, and I think those are and might be one on 9 or 8. It's somewhere.
Yeah, let's hope they don't reaffirm again. So it's.
Do we want to go ahead and repeat the quiz question and the answer?
Okay.
Let's go ahead. So it was, what was Bob Hope's amateur boxing name? And the correct answer was Packy East. And I apologize, many of you might have tried to answer it in the chat feature and weren't unable to. But we did have a correct answer from a Tony in the Q&A. So Tony, if you could please direct message me here, the chat should be enabled now. Send me a message with your address. I'll be sure to send you your prize. Other than that, Jason, do you have any other questions or comments?
No, I've learned a lot, and I've been thinking a lot about it. It's an interesting history. As we were talking about this and listening to you, I'm now curious about, really how J. Edgar Hoover, and then we think about guys like Eliot Ness, because he ended up in Cleveland.
Right.
Like how this kind of all panned out. And now I've got all kinds of more questions that I'm like, but I love the history because you experienced so much of it and you were around at the end of it. So I appreciate your perspective a great deal.
Well, it's like I say, people like George Rennerman, to meet the man, just a great lawyer too. And so, and finally, you went out, Dr. Claypool went out and interviewed him out in Colorado. Just to, we got our heroes. He's one of them. And without his being involved with the reform movement, with the Committee of 500, it might have turned out a lot different than what it did.
And for me, that committee is such an interesting part of our regional history, where a group of people said, okay, we've had enough. And they decided to look beyond any internal prejudices that they had, Catholic, Protestant, and just say, we can't live like this anymore. Our kids can't live like this. We know it's going to financially hurt us in the long run for a while, because these businesses are going to go away, but we just can't.
Jack Steinman, one of the founders of the Committee of 500, the reason he founded it is his client that he had was rolled. He was one of the ones that were rolled when they went to Newport. He says, we can't keep on allowing this kind of stuff to happen. So his own client got hurt here in Newport, so he became very fervent in his backing of the Committee of 500. Had to some of the best people for Wadsworth and Jose, just people just said, like you said, we've had it.
Can't live this way anymore. Yeah.
All right. We did have a last comment from Donna. She said thanks. She says she has both of Hank's books personally autographed.
Yeah, she should.
Yeah. I feel like we just got one more. Okay, good, Tony. I got Tony's address. Good. I will be sure to send you your price. Tony, if you could also send me your last name too, unless I should just address it to Tony. Thank you. Okay, and thank you so much, Dick, for such a great presentation, and Jason for joining and helping out. It's really been interesting to learn about such a different time in Newport.
Yeah, it's. I think it's going to come back. It'd be neat to see how Churchill Downs handles the situation. I think they're going to do. I think Newport's going to come right back again. And like I say, in 1950 they had 31,000 people here. And like I say, today it's about 14,1 or something like that. But it's just
it'll come back.
Yeah.
For more Northern Kentucky history throughout the week, check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest Curators Chat with Jason French, along with all of our past Northern Kentucky History Hour presentations. That's all we're going to have time for this evening. Thank you again to all of the sponsors and supporters of BCM. Until then, take care, everyone, and good night. Thanks, everyone, and thanks especially to you both here tonight. And thanks so much for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.